Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host, and unfortunately, my co-host, the good Captain Ed Mehmet, he was water skiing somewhere in the Bahamas, and he hurt his back, but he'll be back shortly. He's resting. He'll be back next week. Until then, filling in for Captain Ed is my co-host, retired Sergeant Rory Capra. Say hello, Rory.
Oh, hello, Rory. No. Hi, Kevin. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here sitting in the Captain Ed co-pilot seat once again.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So today's guest on Cop Talk is a Manhattan District Attorney candidate running as an independent, Diana Florence. She's our guest today, and she's going to tell us why she's going to be running for the DA of Manhattan and how she's going to win. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, Diana, why don't you tell everyone your background?
Well, thanks so much. I am born and raised New Yorker. When I say born and raised, I actually was born on 68th Street, but my parents in the early 70s moved out to the suburbs. I graduated from high school on Long Island and then went directly to college at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I stayed and then ultimately got my law degree. While I was at Carolina, I originally went down there to actually be a singer, but realized very quickly that my talent, the apex of my talent, was getting in from out of state and was not going to be able to pay the bills singing. So I decided to major in Spanish and art history, spent my junior year abroad and learned to speak fluent Spanish, even though I am not a native speaker. Actually, I have Italian and Jewish background. So I've really found that speaking Spanish, even as a gringa, actually has has opened up barriers a lot. Ultimately, decided to go to law school though because I think I always saw myself as a trial lawyer as kind of like a frustrated performer from not being able to sing. And in terms of what I wanted to do as a lawyer, I wasn't really sure. But then my third year of law school, because in North Carolina, they didn't provide interpreters, if you can believe it, back in the early or mid 90s, I became the de facto defense attorney for all the low level offenders that came through our clinic. And these were, literally women who shoplifted formula from the grocery store and didn't speak English. And I found that the cases, some of them, some of my clients were guilty, some of my clients had, heart-wrenching stories, but it was all at the mercy of the prosecutor to shape what justice looked like. And I realized I didn't want to be on the side where I was always trying to beg for crumbs. I wanted to be that prosecutor so I could shape justice. So I was fortunate enough to be hired in the fall of 1995 by the venerable, legendary Robert Morgenthau. And I spent the next 25 years in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office prosecuting every level of crime, whether it was domestic violence, subway assault, homicide, corruption in the public sector, construction fraud. So I have a very deep background in prosecution, and to me, it's natural that, if you want to be Manhattan DA, you actually have to have done the job. And it's something, by the way, that neither the current DA, Alvin Bragg, has ever really done. He's never been a state assistant district attorney, nor is anyone else in the race. So it's my depth of experience that has led me here.
So the next question was going to be, what is your motivation for running for Manhattan DA?
Well, it's actually my second time running. I ran 4 years ago, right after I left the DA's office. Then at the time, I thought it was the culmination of 25 years and understanding what the office was and the prominent place that it really occupied, not just in New York, frankly, but in the country. We were the absolute preeminent DA's office in the country. What started in Manhattan spread to the rest of the country. And I saw an opportunity to be DA. But unfortunately, 4 years ago, it was a different time. And there were a lot of candidates, a lot of very well-funded candidates, including Alvin Bragg, who was very well funded by the extreme left. So I, as what I call myself a common sense, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a common sense Democrat. I believe that you should be held accountable for your actions. And that really wasn't, the flavor of the week, if you will, and it didn't really fly. And so I went, I basically thought that was the beginning and end of my political career, and I went into private practice. I've been representing NCAA athletes with with the dawn of name, image, and likeness in 2021, I've sort of created a little niche for myself, and it's been very similar to representing victims because, undocumented construction workers, crime victims, they all needed voices. And I found that NCAA athletes similarly needed a voice, and they were engines of billion-dollar industries. So that's what I've been doing, and thought that that was going to be my path for the rest of my days, if you will, until retirement. And then what happened is I realized when in this winter that nobody was stepping up to run against Alvin Bragg. I didn't see anyone who was viable that was running. And I thought that was a problem because my daughter is now the exact same age I was when I moved to New York 30 years ago. And New York is appreciably less safe than it was when I moved here. And so for me, it really came down to, am I okay with my daughter and my son and your kids and all of us? Am I okay with Manhattan being less safe than it was for me and my family when I moved here? And the answer is no. And so I realized that I do have the ability of my heart has always been in public service. And, I had been asked by many people around me, would I consider running again? And did some soul searching, and here I am. And I'm really thrilled to be running again.
Is your family okay with this? You went through the decision-making process with the family, I take it.
I did. Both my kids are now 21 and 24, and I think it was a little harder 4 years ago when they were in high school and beginning of college, but they're good with it, and my husband's been amazing. So yes, they're good with it.
Diana, what did you learn from your career as a Manhattan ADA that you would maybe carry into the top job?
Well, I think it's really about understanding what it takes to prosecute a criminal case. And it really starts with understanding that cases are not about one side or the other. It literally is about balance. It's about balancing the rights of a criminal defendant with the crime victims themselves. And I think that when you have to actually put together a case, you have to analyze each one of them and figure out what justice looks like in that particular case, then you have a unique ability to do that on a larger scale. Part of my experience, though, beyond doing the cases themselves, is also understanding how the office works, understanding how they interact with police officers, how they interact with the public, and how the job, Robert Morgenthau was in the job for 30 plus years. And even though, of course, he was a politician, we never felt that the office was political. We never were told to do things based on a political agenda or criminal justice trends or, things that were, kind of the flavor of the week. Instead, what we saw was, that we needed to treat each case individually and balance it. So, for example, there was a case I did involving a large-scale ring of people that were stealing high-end motorcycles on the street, and they were dismantling them and shipping them to the Caribbean. They were also running guns, and they were also dealing with stolen cars, high-end stolen cars. One of the people that basically sold their car and then reported it stolen was an Uber driver. And it seemed on paper, we had a wiretap, we'd listened to it. It seemed like a open and shut. This is the bad guy. This is what happened. Let's just prosecute it. But when we found out that the Uber driver the car itself had been a lemon, and he'd been underwater with bills, and then he'd had a heart attack, and then his child was sick, and there was a whole bunch of things. It didn't mean that we just dismissed the case, but it meant that we looked at what does justice look like in this case? Are we safer if we send him to prison for 2 years, or do we give this guy an ability to pay restitution and to work his case down from a felony to a misdemeanor? Well, that's what we did. And we did that that wasn't Diana, the prosecutor, doing that on her own. I did that actually with the blessing of my arresting officers who said, you know what, this guy has had quite a deal. And that's what I think that we've lost now with all the rhetoric and politics and, everyone wants clicks and social media followers. We've forgotten that at the end of the day, being a prosecutor is about doing justice.
True.
Yeah, I like that. That you also know, like, the administrative side, not just the law, because you were, in your own right, you were a very experienced trial attorney. Were you not? You did like something like 60 to 100 cases, I think, of your own, right?
I did.
Many of them high profile.
Yes, I did. Yes. And trial work I do think is really important because it's one thing to make an arrest or it's one thing to announce an indictment, but it's another thing. And you guys know from being police officers and testifying, right? You know that there is something to beyond a reasonable doubt and hearing a jury say guilty. And at the end of the day, it's not about winning and losing. It's not sports, right? It is about justice. But at the end of the day, you do need to have a good conviction rate because otherwise what are we doing with taxpayer money? Why are we're not bringing cases for show. We're bringing cases because we believe that this is the way to maintain, New York to be a safe city, a place that people want to come and visit, people want to come and live, and people want to come and work and feel safe in.
Yeah, I like that because you know what? I think that experience is something that definitely is needed in the DA's office, because as we all know, typically young attorneys, they start out where they start. They don't go right to the $1 million law firm. They're going to the DA's office. So to have someone with your background and experience that can also guide the younger DAs, in terms of discerning what cases need to be prosecuted, what needs to be upgraded or downgraded, that is something I think is definitely a positive for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Diana, you worked on so many cases, prosecuted so many cases. Can one sticks out in your mind that you'd like to speak about, or?
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I think from my early part of my career, a domestic violence case that I did that I think, is really still in my heart. It involved the dad attacking his wife and one of his daughters with the back end of a hammer. And this was in Upper Manhattan. And the mom was very much traumatized, you can imagine, and had really never been able to go forward with the charges. He'd been on parole, and he really had a lot of power over her. It was a year of working with Ramona and her daughters, and ultimately we worked together, and they were able to testify, and we were about to actually go to trial. They were sitting in the witness room, and happily, he did the right thing and he pleaded guilty. But that case, I think, why it stands out. I mean, I've done lots of big trials, and there's lots of fun ones to talk about, and we can talk about those later. But why that one really sticks out is that these two little girls, came to my office. They had asthma, they had everything, against them, and yet their mom, who had a very tough life, she knew that she had to do this for her daughters. And I'm so fortunate, I actually am still in touch with them, and they came to my announcement. And, it was seeing those girls and seeing who are now moms and aunts. And, just seeing that when you do justice the right way, you can have impacts not only on their lives, but people's lives around them. And that's why I think, being in public service and doing what we've done, what you all have done in your careers, it's why we do this. Certainly it's not about the money, and it's really not about the attention, but it's about understanding that at the end of days that you actually can impact for the good people's lives.
Let's talk about a fun case.
So do you guys remember the term lush worker?
Lush worker.
So you guys weren't transit cops, so you might not remember that name.
No
So
transit.
the lush worker was someone that literally, what it sounds, they worked over the lushes, the drunk people on the subway.
Okay.
So there was a which this is a real 90s term. Now I'm really showing my age, right?
That's good. That's good.
So there was a case that I did, and again, I'm giving you the street crime cases. We can talk about the construction stuff and the 9/11 fraud later, but this was a woman. So what happened? So the A train, it ends at 168th Street. And literally it doesn't even turn around like the 6 train at Brooklyn Bridge. It literally just stops and then it goes the other way. And this lady, she looked like something out of My Fair Lady. She had like a crazy hat, and she was like she liked to drink and whatever. And she had all her bags, and she looked like literally, like what they used to call a bag lady, because she had 16 bags with her. And this guy went over to her and he took one of her bags. And, and she was, upset. And a cleaner in the subway station actually saw the guy do it, the lush worker. Everyone knew who this was. The police actually had like a picture of this guy. He was kind of the number one lush worker. You know, everyone wants to be the top of their career. This guy was the number one. And he saw him and he pointed him out, and we were able to apprehend him. But here's the crazy part. He goes through the bag. He's looking for money. He doesn't see anything. So he dumps the bag in the trash can on the platform. What he didn't realize was, even though she looked like a bag lady, if you will, what she was a pretty well-off lady, and her bag that he dumped was full of about $30,000 worth of jewelry that it was in the trash. So what was crazy was, you know, everyone doing the right thing. You know, the cleaner who could have, this was 3:00 in the morning, right? He could have just gone on, right? But he points him out. Police apprehend the guy, and ultimately, this is a guy who had, grand larceny after grand larceny, all these low-level things. We were able to charge him. Actually, it was more because it was over $50,000. So we actually were able to charge him with the B felony, which was crazy that we could do that. But it was just because we had to get an appraisal of the jewelry, and it was a little bit of a thing. But we ultimately were able to bring higher charges, and so sometimes it just works well. And I mean, getting the lady to testify was a whole other story, and we got her a motel room on the West Side, and it was the usual. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have equal stories of dealing with witnesses like that, but it was great.
So Diana, if you win, because you sound like you're the common sense law and order candidate. If you win, I take it that you're not going to continue with what is now the infamous Day 1 memo of D.A. Bragg, which led basically to downgrading felonies like robberies and other crimes.
Yeah, well, to say the least, I will be discontinuing that. But I think that
you have your own policy on Day 1.
Yes, I think the Day 1. It's funny because last time when I ran, I prided myself on really being a deep thinker, and I had all these great thoughts about how I was going to do different things, and I'll still do all those things, and we can talk about those at another time. But my platform has become so simple. It's just I'm going to prosecute crime. That's it. I mean, and again, it's not about, sending someone to Rikers for a year for shoplifting a tube of toothpaste. It's not that. It's just actually holding someone accountable. If you shoplift, you just don't get a pass. Or if you use drugs on our corner, I understand that, that drug addiction is a public health issue, but it can't be that we surrender our streets to people that are shooting heroin either. I mean, my kids went to school 5 blocks away at PS 116. We walked every day. When we saw people that were exposing themselves and things like that, and this is in the early aughts, we could call the police and something would happen. Now, because of the policies, the failed policies, I'd argue, of Alvin Bragg, now we're basically surrendering our streets to people that are violating the law, and that's not okay.
Diana, that brings me to my next question. How would you address the equality of life crimes?
Yeah, so it's exactly that. Look, I started in 1995, and I had my first 2 years, I had misdemeanors, 300 misdemeanors. And, it was never about, sending everyone to prison for a year for jumping over the turnstile. But it was about accountability. And I think the problem right now is that under D.A. Bragg, what happens is everybody gets diverted. It doesn't matter if you have five misdemeanors, 12 misdemeanors, it doesn't matter. And even when you divert someone, as I understand, if they don't go to the program or they don't do the community service, back in the day, that was called a violation of the conditional discharge. And when you violated that, you actually had a penalty. You went to prison or jail, well, not prison, jail. You did more community service. You paid a fine, whatever. There was a consequence. So to me, the quality of life that, I've just sort of mentioned in passing like now, it's about prosecuting it. And obviously, like I say, we can offer that drug abuser a program, of course, that's fine. But if they don't go, they don't get to go back to the corner and keep shooting heroin, right. and you're, and for everyone to walk over as they go to school, or to be terrorized by when they're coming home from, dinner with their family or whatever. That's what it is. It's just about enforcement. I mean, it's almost can't believe this is what I'm running on because it seems so simple.
Crazy. So if you do the crime, you do the time.
Yeah.
Right? That's it.
Diana, how would you use the power of the DA's office to combat what has become a recent rise in antisemitism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem is that we are not, I don't think that the Manhattan DA's office has treated anti-Semitism with the gravity that it deserves. And I mean, look at what happened at Columbia University. Mm-hmm. All of those cases were dropped. There is certainly a First Amendment right to protest, absolutely.
Sure.
And peaceful protest is fine. But when you damage and you vandalize and you terrorize people, then that becomes something that you need to take seriously. I mean, there was another case, I believe, even of anti-Semitism, where ultimately the feds took it from the Manhattan DA's office. And while I don't know the facts behind why that happened, you do have to wonder that if the DA is putting out a memo that says, I'm going to decriminalize everything, that perhaps the feds felt they needed to step in to make sure that justice was really done. So for me, anti-Semitism, anti-Black, anti-Asian, anti-anything needs to be prosecuted. If someone is being targeted for their identity, then that needs, there are enhancements. There are hate crime laws that are 25 years old, and we need to be using those and making sure people are held accountable.
How would your office deal with ICE enforcement for immigration issues? Because I know that's a topical issue here in the city, and as well as other areas of the country.
Absolutely. So look, I think that it's important to understand that when you have a case, when someone is charged with a crime, that it's important for due process to go all the way. So that means that if the defendant is an undocumented person, I do not think that ICE needs to be taking them immediately and basically circumventing the criminal justice system. And I'll tell you why. Because that person, if they're deported and they try to come back, there's no warrant. There's no nothing because the case goes away. The better way to do this, and the way I think that the best way to handle ICE, is you prosecute the case. The minute that person is convicted, fine. They don't need to. I'm happy for them to be off the taxpayer dole. They don't need to do prison here. If you want to deport them, fine. But I do think it's very important that due process happens here, not just for the crime victim who needs closure, but also for our system, so we can track who's coming in and out.
How would you respond to the critics who say that the Manhattan DA's office has become very political?
I think they're right, frankly. I think that's the problem. I don't think that politics is any place in a prosecutor's office. I'm running as an independent for just that reason. When I was hired by Robert Morgenthau, of course he was a politician. He was a Democrat. But we never were taught to do cases based on political agendas. It was always about doing justice. And that's what we have to return back to the DA's office.
Right. Well, also, Manhattan DA's office, and I believe all the other boroughs as well, Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, they have a investigators detail, okay, and then also a detective squad as well.
Yeah.
From what I understand, the detective squads are really down, not just because of manpower. I'm not sure why that is. Would you happen to know why, or would you have any input on that?
I'm not aware, but I worked a lot with the detective squad, the DA squad, as we called them in the day, when I was in the Special Prosecutions Bureau, and it was really terrific to have them, the NYPD, right there on 2 floors above us when we did cases. I worked a lot with them on 9/11 fraud. After 9/11, believe it or not, people made up family members and collected.
A couple of those cases in Midtown North Detective Squad.
Excellent. Yes. I'm sorry. I don't think we ever worked together on them, but I did a couple of very high-profile ones, including a guy who made up a 13th son and got several $100,000 from the charities. And all of those cases, what was so terrific about doing those cases with the DA squad was that we literally could, do them together quickly. I'll tell you a funny one, actually. There was a guy, his name was Woodrow Fleming, and he was a defendant, and he had created a fake claim regarding. He said he was a veteran, so he said that he had a table that he sold jeans at in front of the towers. And what he did was he realized he wasn't homeless. He lived in Upper Manhattan, but he used to go to Ward's Island a lot when his girlfriend threw him out. So he went to the Ward's Island shelter and he recruited all these people from Ward's Island to be his workers. And he took each one of them. He had a car. He had actually like an old Cadillac. It was like a 70s Cadillac. And this is in late 01, early 02. And he would pick them up and he would drive them to, at that point it was in Highbridge in the Bronx. It had moved from the pier, the Red Cross, to Highbridge. And he took them and he gave them, he had a bank account. He gave them, he did these like fake W-2 and said like, okay, these are my workers and we lost all my merchandise and, so give me money. And so Robin Hood was giving, I think, $6,000 and Red Cross gave a whole bunch more. And what was crazy about it is that he kept doing it every morning. Like he would go and get more people. And once we figured out that it was all fake, my detectives, 2 detectives in the DA squad, they would literally, they lived, one of them lived in the Bronx. I think one of them maybe lived upstate. And they would literally come down the FDR. They'd stop at Ward's Island. They would pick up the next person. They would come to my office. And by the time I got in at 9:30 with my coffee, we'd have a full confession from the 2 people that they picked for the day. Because there were about 30 of them who would all say, and these were actually like heart-wrenching people. Like these were people who were so down on their luck, and they were like, he would give them. They would get. I should say this. He would get like $10,000-$15,000, and he would give them like $200. So the first thing they would do is say, "It was Woody Fleming, and I got $200, and I'll testify."
Unbelievable, right? It's crazy. It's amazing what went on back then.
It was crazy.
Besides the disaster and losing so many people, and
it
then
was
you
crazy.
had all this, scams going on.
It was so many scams. And it was funny because, again, with all these Ward's Island people, it was actually a really good opportunity. Again, it's sort of how law enforcement could work the right way because these people, again, had so many issues and we didn't have to prosecute them for felonies. I mean, honestly, we gave them, most of them, we gave them misdemeanors. We helped them get into services because they needed it. And they were, they were also victims. They were victims of this guy.
Right, yeah. But the one lady I had, she claimed she was with her child down on the pier, when it was down at the pier.
Right.
Because Midtown North Precinct covered that area. And she claimed the husband was killed in 9/11. Of course, it all was all not true.
Yeah.
And she was arrested and prosecuted. And basically, I believe it was on a hardship. Okay, go back to California, see you later. But that's what happened. There was so many of those cases back then,
Yeah, but like Woody went to state prison. Cyril Kendall, the one who made up the Sun, went to state prison. I sent a bunch of my cases were very serious because they got a lot of money and they really. The Kendall one was particularly awful because he literally co-opted different people's stories, and I had to at the trial because that one went to trial. Woody's actually we picked a jury and then he pleaded guilty, but Kendall was crazy because he literally had his kids testify and lie, and we had to like.
Oh wow!
It was crazy, and we had people from 9/11 who were talking about like we never interviewed with this guy. This person didn't exist.
Yeah. Our case never went that far. Pretty much was just falsifying official documents.
Yeah. No, mine were larcenies and false filings. Yes, but it was a lot of money because those. I think the guys with the guys who they go big or go home, right?
Well, they actually received the money.
Yes.
Yeah, our subject did not.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway.
Oh, you know what? I just wanted to go back to something that Kevin brought up, and we touched on it. You talk about the politicization of the DA's office.
Yes.
I think in the law enforcement community, there's a general perception that when cops are involved, inevitably they make arrests. Sometimes there's force used. Has to be. It's just the way it is. But oftentimes, at least there's the perception of that oftentimes post the arrest and during the prosecution, the DA's office then starts looking at the cops, sometimes wanting to grant immunity to the person that's arrested, to testify against the police officer or to bring charges against the police officer. What would be your approach to that, and how would you deal with potentially not, or rather eliminating this aggressive or excessive overcharging of police officers for some type of wrongdoing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that for too long there was this sort of idea that, police and prosecutors for that matter, could do whatever they wanted. There was no accountability. So suddenly about 5 years ago, perhaps in the wake of George Floyd, there was this idea that now everything has to be prosecuted. And I think that an overcorrection, I would say at the very least, but I think what it comes down to is this, right? Nobody's above the law. But we also can't criminalize things that should be administrative. And so, there's a good story with not a police officer, actually a corrections officer. That I learned from a friend of mine who represents corrections officers. And this was a corrections officer who was attacked by an inmate, very, very obviously on tape. The whole thing. And once the person was taken off of the corrections officer, she then went over and she kicked the guy. Okay. Should not have done that for sure. I mean, the incident was over. So, but instead of handling that administratively, what did the district attorney's office do? They charged her with a misdemeanor. On no planet would you charge anyone who's not yet wearing a uniform on that in that case. Never.
Right.
There's no injury. Mm-hmm. It was provoked. It was stupid, for sure. And because, frankly, she's in uniform, there is an administrative procedure that she should have been subject to. But by actually circumventing that and charging this corrections officer, basically what you did was you basically made an example of someone that really didn't deserve to be made an example of, and she didn't commit a crime, and they wasted a lot of money. I do know that ultimately the case was dismissed. So what we did was we just made a big show for, I guess, people that want to see people in uniform, arrested and ridiculed. But no justice was done. No one was held accountable. And I'm not even sure she ultimately was even administratively held accountable, because I'm sure that the department was so enraged that she was treated the other way. So that doesn't really make any sense either. To me, it's like, if you guys have kids, I have, again, too. But, it's about when you punish your kids, right, it has to be proportionate to what they've done. Otherwise, if it's out of whack, right, you're not going to have any. They're not going to tell you things later when you lose trust. And if it's too light, they're going to think that it's fine and they can do whatever they want. So, again, I hate to put it in those terms, but we need to be thinking about, common sense. I know that sounds obvious, but that's what we need to be doing.
Sure. Crime needs to fit the time, right? Basically,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On that note, Manhattan DA's office, I believe they have I've been told anyway, I don't know officially, but I believe they have a unit that will look at body cam, police officers' body cam. They should be looking at it to prosecute the case, but sometimes they're looking at it, from what I'm being informed, is to what did the police officer do wrong? Like basically under this Bragg, DA Bragg, I believe he has a unit that just wants to see what did the officer do, something he shouldn't have done, he could have done better. Let's prosecute the cop instead of the person who was arrested and committed the crime. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not aware that they're doing that, but what I can tell you is that it's very easy to look in hindsight. I often think about even my own career as a DA, right? The case I mentioned, Cyril Kendall, the 9/11 case that I did. That case was in 2002 that I indicted, in the trial in 2003. So I was 8 years into my career as a DA. I did a great job in that case, right? I got a conviction, I got, a good time, whatever. If I think 5 years later, I would have done much better job. I would have investigated this and that. I would have found different witnesses. I would have different things because I was better at my job because I was more experienced, right? We can all go and look at things as a learning tool. Maybe the body cam footage could be looked at to say, hey, you know what? It would have been better if you'd brought him to the corner as opposed to in the middle of the street or whatever. We can do it for learning, but to actually look at it as a Monday morning quarterback, that doesn't make any sense to me. And it's also not what the district attorneys is supposed to do. We're not supposed to be scrutinizing, looking in hindsight for crimes. Again, I see if that is happening, it strikes me that that's about, satisfying some extreme lefty kind of desires for, kind of revenge and not about justice. That doesn't sound like justice to me.
Absolutely not.
What's your feeling on street vendors, as it impacts traditional businesses, the brick and mortar stores in the city? Because, recently the city council just allowed a lot of leniency for street vending.
Yeah, I think that there has to be some common sense to this. I don't know about y'all, but I'll be driving on the FDR, and there'll be, people standing literally in the middle of the street with mangoes and sodas and water bottles. And I mean, I'm scared to death to see them. They could be run over. I know there's traffic, and I would never also eat those fruits because I think that who knows? I mean, not that, I want to wash my fruit and eat it in a certain way. And I think that exists because there's a lack of enforcement at this point. I think that there's a way to do it. I mean, there's certainly we should have street vendors. I don't think that we can, I think that bricks and mortar stores, should have a say in it. But again, it's really the problem, I think, with that rule and so many others is that you have people legislating from on high and they don't talk to the community. And that's something that I learned when I was a prosecutor, that, doing cases, waiting for them to come to you and decreeing that this was a priority, as opposed to going to the communities, to the neighborhoods and saying like, hey, our street vendors a problem here. Like maybe the businesses on, 38th Street, they love it because maybe that drives foot traffic, but maybe on 48th Street, they don't like it. And I think that that's the idea, is that you have to balance it. And I also think that there has to be, some enforcement, because otherwise there are people who get licenses. I know that they're not easy to get, but then others that are just not licensed. That's not fair either. People that follow the law shouldn't, feel like idiots.
Well, you should be licensed,
yes.
Right? And that's the bottom line. Same thing with peddlers too, right? The peddlers on the street, selling the Rolex or Rolex, whatever couple watches you want to call them, they're all over the place in Midtown, but if they're licensed properly, great. If not, same thing with the demonstrations, right? Sure. Let's go back to, all the demonstrations with George Floyd and all that, BLM. As far as I'm concerned, if you can't turn a protest, or I should say a demonstration, into a protest, into a parade. You know what I mean? And start walking over bridges. I mean, you need to shut it down, and everyone needs to be prosecuted. If you want to protest, that's fine, or demonstrate, absolutely. But there's ways to go about it. Get a permit, and all that. Am I right with that?
Absolutely.
You dealt with
we dealt with them all the time.
Park,
it was, part of the bane of our existence in many ways, yeah.
So just do it that way, and then it's all good. Everybody's happy, But it's crazy. So Diana, what would be your vision now for the Manhattan DA's office?
Well, I mean, again, it's going back to basics. One of the things that, I think what is really lacking now is from the start, one of the reasons that so many people from all over the world wanted to work as an ADA in the Manhattan DA's office under Morgenthau was the training that we got, not only from, lawyers that had done the work, but also mentoring. And it's about sort of learning that judgment. So it starts with doing small cases. I mean, one of the first cases I did was a subway grinder, literally, ground against a woman on the 6 train. And, I didn't know how to do this, a trial. I learned, how do I talk to a witness? She was she was very scared, and she was very soft-spoken, and it was embarrassing. How do you talk to a person, who's gone through that? And how do you convince her to testify so that this guy who ended up having 30 convictions, right? How do we make sure that at least we can, this was a little bit of a loophole because it was a B, if you guys remember, sex abuse, the B misdemeanor. So it was sort of it was 90 days.
Right.
But it's better than no days, right? So you had to convince her to testify so that we could at least, stop the bleeding for a bit. So I think for me, learning learning from experienced lawyers, making them want to stay. I mean, I'm hearing, that the DA's office is now giving people cash bonuses to try to entice them to stay because so many people are unhappy in the office. So to me, it starts with actually just rebuilding, the culture of the district attorney's office, which starts with training your young attorneys the right way and treating your mid-level and upper district attorneys, with respect and paying them appropriately.
When you were in the ADA's office, Manhattan DA, how many ADAs were there? Do you know? Do you recall roughly?
I think it was about 500.
500.
Yes.
And what would you say is today?
I know it's down. I don't know. I've heard there's a lot of attrition, and again, this bit of there's a lot of people leaving, a lot of experienced people leaving. I even saw a posting on LinkedIn for a supervisor, which that was always filled within. That is, and that's not a legal thing because that's only because there's been plenty of other ones that have been filled within. That just tells you how bad things are.
Wow. So is that, you think, in all the boroughs or just Manhattan?
Well, I think Manhattan in particular. No, in fact, I think the other boroughs are doing just fine. I think it's particularly bad in here in Manhattan
Because of Bragg, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, I think when you have a boss who thinks that that prosecution is not your job, when other people went there to do that, that is a big disconnect. And so then you look to, if you're not supported by the person at the top, and part of the reason I think that they're not supported by the person at the top is, again, he never stood in criminal court and arraigned someone. He never stood in front of the grand jury and presented a case, and he never, in New York County, and he never presented, a case to a petit jury and argued for a conviction in New York State Supreme Court. And I think doing that as an ADA, I was proud to do that. I remember the morning of my summation of a very serious case involving the falsification of the concrete at the World Trade Center, Yankee Stadium, and other major landmarks. I remember getting off the subway at Foley Square and feeling like I was the luckiest person in the world that I got to deliver a summation on behalf of the people of the state of New York. That's how you feel when you're doing the right thing and you're supported. You're in the office that, recognizes that the job that you're doing is the right one and not what's going on now.
Diana, if elected, what would be your first policy change?
My first policy change is to revoke the day one memo. Very simple. I mean, I wish I could come up with something like a little more exciting, but really that's it.
Done.
Done. There you
Rory?
go. Diana, in your career as a DA, you've been so innovative with things. You were the person that actually started the construction fraud task force in the DA's office, and you also led the way for companies, I guess, or people that were defrauding 9/11 charities. And 9/11, of course, is something that's particularly law enforcement personnel and FD, fire department, we're very sensitive to that. So can you tell us something about that you went after some of these people that were defrauding charities that were trying to donate money for 9/11?
Yeah. So, I mean, the charity fraud was a big part of the work that I did after I left the trial division. So that was between 2000 and 2007. And so, yes, it was when people defrauded the Red Cross, Safe Horizon, and other charities, pretending that their loved ones, had died. Also had, other companies like the Rockefeller Foundation. We had someone who had made up a charity and got matching funds from the Rockefeller Foundation. And, the thing is, right, I mean, these charities, they do good work, right? But if their money is squandered for people that then spend it on, lavish vacations or, at that time, flat screen TVs were very expensive, not anymore. But these were important cases to me, and I felt working with the some, again, as I mentioned before, some of the cases it was 9/11 victims, people that were in the towers, and I was very fortunate. I was on maternity leave. My now 24-year-old was 2 months old, and I remember that morning and knew that New York would never be the same. And one of the things though about after 9/11 though is it was a time though, as awful as it was, is we all came together to help each other, but some people came together to help themselves, and that was a privilege to be able to at least get justice for people that were victims here, by not only prosecuting the fraudsters, but also after when they were rebuilding the Freedom Tower, when the companies that were charged with making sure the building materials were safe, that holding them accountable because there was a lot of money in reconstructing, and they basically what they did is the concrete was supposed to be 12,000 PSI. And the reason that's very, very strong concrete in this building is probably 3,000 PSI, to give you a sense. And the reason that it was going to be so much stronger is because of terrorism. That was a big part of it, to make the building more stronger because it is a target. And And by cutting corners and, finding out that in fact the concrete was 8,000, luckily we caught it at the early stages, because the building would have been, undermined in terms of the stability had we not caught it when we did. So it's been a pleasure, and an honor to do this work and to do it alongside, again, police officers, the Port Authority, the MTA, private sector, going out into the community, unions. I've been so blessed to meet so many people in Manhattan as an ADA, and it's why I ultimately, felt that I had that I'm the right person to be the Manhattan DA, because, I understand what people who live, work, and visit in Manhattan want, and again, it's not all that mysterious. They want to be safe.
Right. Sure. True. You said right before 9/11 you had you had a child, a daughter, correct?
Yes.
My daughter Mackenzie was born 3 months before 9/11.
Oh, okay. My daughter's June 27th.
Okay, June 7th.
Oh, there we go.
All good. Amazing, right? Oh, speaking about that year, 2001, do you remember the Carnegie Deli homicide?
Of course.
That was our office.
Oh, wow.
I was there I responded the first night it happened, right there.
Oh, wow.
A bunch of detectives, Midtown North Precinct, everybody ran right to the scene.
That was something.
And that was some case, that went on for about 3 months. I think July of 2001 was when everyone was arrested and prosecuted.
Wow.
And indicted. And then a couple months later, we went from Carnegie Deli homicide, from my office anyway, into 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy time, 2001. Crazy. But so what would you want the Manhattan voters to remember when they go into the booth on Election Day in 2025?
That there is a real choice. I know that we have gotten to a point in our lives that everything is so, it's everyone's divided, right? And you're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, and you vote one or the other. And that and it doesn't matter, even if whatever you do, that the people that are running are just often they're talking heads, empty suits. And I'm here because I'm not that. I'm not a politician. I am a real choice. I'm running as an independent. Yes, I am a registered Democrat, but really at the end of the day, the party affiliation has nothing to do with it. My values, my reason for running is because I believe in common sense. I understand how the DA's office can be the place that it was, a place that people respect and can go to for help and really get justice from. I understand that the district attorney's office has not changed since 1975 when Morgenthau changed it, and that it's long overdue. That's 50 years that we need to do new things. And we need to do old things. Old things meaning prosecute crime, and new things meaning we need to support our prosecutors. We need to revamp things because we are in the digital age. We're on a time where AI and things are coming into play. But there are some old-fashioned things that we can do as law enforcement personnel. We can be there. We can be that last, backstop against sort of chaos and all the rhetoric and the fake news and all the things that we see on the internet. In the real world, the district attorney's office should be the place that you can come and ask for help and get help.
Right. Very good. Rory?
We talked about it before, because you touched on it, that you kind of created a little niche for yourself in the law, where you now represent collegiate athletes, and I think that also speaks to the innovation that you've shown throughout your entire career, with starting the task forces and going after the 9/11 fraud charities and all these kind of things. Can you tell us about what made you realize that athletes need to be protected, like collegiate athletes?
Yeah, so the last DA election was June. I think it was June 23rd of 2021, and literally July 1st, 2021. The Supreme Court came down with the Alston case, which was a unanimous 9-0 case against the NCAA. Imagine Judge Kavanaugh and Sotomayor all agreeing on the same thing. And what they agreed on is that the NCAA really had no business, keeping athletes in that case, honestly, from getting laptops. But what it ultimately led to was, this new era of name, image, and likeness, and athletes being able to be paid for their work, right? And the reality is, there's billions and billions of dollars at stake. That's why the NCAA didn't want that. What I saw saw, though, when that happened, and to be honest with you, I was burnt out from running for DA. I didn't want to be a defense attorney. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew what I didn't want to do. But I saw right away that college athletes and crime victims very similar, and particularly construction workers, right? Construction workers are engines of billion-dollar industries, yet they often don't get the money. They're vulnerable, they're exploited, and that's what I saw college athletes. So I realized that there's also a lot of people that also come, like after 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy, right? Anytime there's something, the fraudsters come out of the woodwork, and I saw that was going to happen, and so I, kind of started to educate myself. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a proud Tar Heel, and sports have always been a big deal, for me as part of my college and law school experience. And so I realized that, I could maybe, try to help out. And what I did was I reached out to the athletic department and just sort of offered my services, even though I really didn't know what I was doing in sports. But, because I sort of have always seen things in a different way, they took me up on it, and I came up with a strategy to help them with one of their athletes getting eligibility, and then connected with some amazing lawyers at my current firm, Shoemaker, who have been in the business for 40 years. And again, sometimes it's new blood, right? The district attorney, actually the law enforcement, and I know you guys have your second careers too, right? That law enforcement thing can really pivot into something else.
Oh, sure.
And so it ended up being that I've now done several cases all over the country, suing the NCAA, winning eligibility, and it's been a pleasure. My heart is in public service. I so want to be a district attorney, but this has been a privilege as well.
Diana, I'm going to ask you what may be a little bit of an uncomfortable and tough question, but I think it's important for our listeners and for people that you're asking to vote for you, so they should have kind of full disclosure and they should know. In 2020, you actually resigned from the district attorney's office over allegations that you withheld evidence in a particular case. Can you tell us about that and what led to your resignation?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to answer the question. I think that it's always important to think about context. I was a prosecutor for 25 years, and I handled thousands of cases. And there was indeed a mistake in the discovery in this particular case. And as soon as I learned of it, I turned it over. But, we all knew that back then when this happened, that the discovery laws of 2019, which had just come into effect, were going to handcuff prosecutors, and they were going to be onerous. And I was, frankly, unfortunately, an early example of that. That law is not only handcuff prosecutors around the state. Alvin Bragg himself, among other prosecutors, went to Albany just this year. It took him 4 years to see exactly the issues with this discovery law, and now it's been changed. I think what is also important to note is that at the time that I, made this discovery mistake, I owned up to it. And when I went, to run for DA 4 years ago, the New York City Bar Association, which vets, DA candidates and judicial candidates, they deemed me fully qualified, not something that they give to every candidate in that race. And that was knowing about this discovery mistake. For me, there are always going to be mistakes made in things that we do. It's about how we handle them. And it's also about making sure that prosecutors, because we do have new discovery laws now, and you need to make sure that the prosecutors that are doing the job day in, day out have the tools so that they're not chasing paper. And that's about revamping the office and making sure that there is a department that is devoted solely to helping those DAs handle discovery issues so that we can minimize mistakes. We're never going to get rid of them, but if we can minimize them and make the district attorneys less about paper and more about justice, then I think that it will all be for the better.
Thank you for your openness and honesty in answering that question.
Yeah. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Diana, in closing, what would you like to tell our listeners? Is there any way they could get involved in your campaign or donate to your campaign? Yes.
So please, sadly, politics is, I learned last time, very much about money. So if any of you can spare even $5, $10, whatever you can do, it'd be a pleasure to accept your donation. My name, Diana Florence, Diana like the princess, Florence like the city. My website, Diana Forda.com. Again, Diana4da.com. If you can't afford to donate, please vote for me, or you can help me at any subway station or Green Market, or spread the word. I just need word of mouth. I like to say that I'm like a good restaurant that nobody knows about, but you've been so gracious to allow me to come here and spread a little bit of my message. So thank you.
Our pleasure, and we like what we hear. So, Diana, we wish you luck in the campaign for Manhattan District Attorney, running as an independent. Rory?
Yeah, absolutely. Diana, you've been an amazing guest. You're bright. You're full of energy. You're innovative. And you have a soft side as well. You're not just a tough prosecutor, but you also have a soft side.
Thank you.
It's very nice. And I understand that, people don't realize, but you not only graduated with a law degree and the Bachelor of Arts, but you were also Phi Beta Kappa. So you're really smart, too.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for being here today. So once again, good luck to you, and hopefully have you back on before the election as well.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Diana.
It's been an honor.
I'd like to sit in for the captain, Sergeant Rory Capra, and of course thank our guest, Diana Florence. Wish you luck in your election for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Don't forget to vote in November. Until next time, you can follow us at WABC Cop Talk. That's at WABC Cop Talk. Also, until next time, God bless you, God bless America, God bless law enforcement throughout the world, and God bless our U.S. military. Thank you. Be safe out there.
This is Cop Talk.